started looking forward to things that were going to be happening today and different stuff like that, I decided that last installment of covenant relationship, that I'm going to put that off for a little bit, and then we'll come back to it later time. It just seemed like there was some other stuff based off of what we've been seeing and what we feel that we're going to be experiencing, that I had to kind of change a little bit of direction this week. So as Tyler said, we're going to have Richard speaking next week, and then we're going to have 3 weeks of Olivia speaking to us. And when we come back from that, we'll probably have a couple more messages, and then maybe at some point in time I'll go back to that final installment of covenant relationship with God. Because what we've covered so far were the 4 major covenants of the Old Testament, and what we had left was the New Covenant, the New Testament, and the covenant that came through it. So as you look at your Bible and you look at things that are going on in your life, if you understand those covenants of the Old Testament, it'll help you to understand why things are the way that they are in the New Testament. And can you give me my water? I'm sorry, please. So to help you understand why things are the way that they are in the New Testament and what it means to us. Because a lot of people, they'll look at things, thank you ma'am, they'll look at things and they will see what they believe is the way to go, which is, I don't have to worry about the Old Testament because we live in the New Testament, okay? Which is somewhat true. Yes, we live in the New Testament. That's about the only true part of that. But the Old Testament, it still has so much value to us as Christians and what we do in our walk. So, that being said, I wanted to address with you guys my life as a Christian teen. Okay? Not my life, but just my life in general. So all of us, our lives as a Christian teen. So, as we look at things tonight, what does it mean to be Christian? Anybody. What's it mean to be Christian? You can give me the Bible answer, the church answer, the non-Bible answer, whatever. Who's got an answer? What does it mean to be Christian?
Follower of Christ.
A follower of Christ, okay? So what does that mean? You believe in Jesus? Okay. Glad you said that.
You live by the Bible?
You live by the Bible. That's probably a little bit better description. You should live by the Bible, right? So, I don't know if everybody here has accepted Jesus Christ as their Savior. I'm hoping that you have, and if not, there's every single time that we're together, there's an opportunity to do so. All you have to do is come down and talk to us. And let me make this clear. You talking to me isn't what saves you. You coming and hearing what I have to say isn't necessarily what saves you. You coming down and saying a prayer and a bunch of us gathering around you, that's not what saves you. What saves you is your acceptance of Jesus Christ and the fact that He died on the cross for us and He rose again on the 3rd day so that we might have life through Him, through His grace, okay? So, when we decide that we're going to walk as Christians, that we're going to become Christians, is it just enough to say, I'm Christian?
No.
What do you expect out of a Christian? What do others expect out of a Christian? Do they expect somebody that's going to come up and grab their Bible and smack you over the head with it? Come in. I'm going to smack you over the head with it.
No.
Is that what people expect from us?
No.
Some people do. Okay? Is being a Christian saying, hey, I'm going to be a Christian, but I'm just going to go about and do my own thing, and as long as I say that I'm following Jesus, it's all good. Because that preacher said that all I have to do is call out the name of Jesus. Is that being a Christian? No, it's not. It's not. So what are things that are considered being a Christian? How do we become Christian?
Spreading His word.
We spread His word.
Show love and kindness to others.
We show love and kindness to others. What else? What does that mean? Well, let's take a little bit of a look here in a little bit, okay? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand back there.
Watch your profanity.
Watch your profanity. That is probably a good one. The Bible does say, let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth that is not helpful for the edification of the saints. scriptures. Okay, so what happened that made us follow Jesus? Well, one, you had to make a conscious decision, right? So I hope that each and every one of you, if you haven't already, makes that conscious decision that I am going to follow Jesus. It's like I was saying earlier, it's important. It is going to be the single most important decision that you make in your entire life. Okay? And that could include anything from the day that you were born to you having decided that you're going to become a millionaire by creating some great invention out there that nobody's ever even heard of yet. Even if you become a millionaire, it's still not as important as you deciding that you're going to follow Jesus. Who believes that? I believe that. I know that that's true. Okay, so we accept Christ. We make that conscious decision. We accept Christ. We then become an ambassador to Him. If the United States decides that they want to be represented over in Timbuktu, wherever, they send an ambassador there. And that ambassador is supposed to live up to the values of the United States so that people know what the United States stands for, right? It's the same thing with Jesus. If we decide that we're going to be Jesus, or that we're going to be Christians, that's exactly what we are. We are Jesus to this world. We become Jesus to this world. We're His reflection. We show exactly what values He has and what He wants us to do. And there's quite a bit of that. So, Galatians chapter 20 tells us, chapter 2, verse 20, tells us, "And I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body," right here, "I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave Himself for me." Okay? Ephesians tells us, in chapter 1, "When you heard the message of truth, the gospel and of salvation, and when you believed in Him," so it's more than just saying, it's actually believing. Chapter 1, verses 13 and 14 of Ephesians. "And you believed in Him, you were also sealed with the promise of the Holy Spirit. He is the down payment on your inheritance for the redemption of the possession to praise of His glory." So I read from the CSB Bible. It's a little bit easier for me to understand. It's Christian Standard Bible. So if you look at a different version, you might see some different words there. So what does that mean to us? Well, how many of you have been a Christian? Don't raise your hands, okay? But in your mind, how many of you have been a Christian for any length of time? Let's say 6 months or longer. Okay? If you've been a Christian for 6 months or longer, you've probably noticed that there's certain things that are going to happen in your life that are changed or that are different. And if you haven't, then we need to go back and we need to take a look at what the Bible is supposed to be telling us, at what we're supposed to be learning from the Bible. So also as a Christian, does being a Christian mean that everything's going to be all perfect for us? Sunshine, rainbows, butterflies, all that kind of stuff? No. Did Jesus promise us that? Did He promise us a perfect world? He did, just not here, right? Okay. But what is one thing that He did promise us? John chapter 16, verse 33, Jesus is speaking and He says, "I told you these things so that in me you will have peace." Why? Why do we need peace? Well, glad you asked, because in the next sentence He says, "You will have suffering in this world."
What was that, John 1?
John chapter 16, verse 33. You will have suffering in this world. Be courageous. There's that but. Be courageous. I have already conquered the world. So what's that telling us? It's telling us there's going to be hard times that come in life. And just because we decide to be Christian doesn't mean that there's not going to be hard times in life. Those hard times could range from somebody in the family being sick, somebody dying, which there's a lot of that going on right now. Some of it's COVID related. Some of it's just people's hearts are failing them because there's such a fear of everything that's going on in this world nowadays. Some of it could just be that, it was somebody's time. So there's there's that. What other kind of things do we fear? Maybe we see that one kid that everybody picks on, and we decide that we're going to do it too, because it's the cool thing to do, right? Let me tell you something about the cool kids. Cool kids usually don't make it in life. I'll tell you that from experience. Cool kids usually do not make it in life. Not as successfully as what the other kids do. They haven't learned the lessons that they need to learn in order to make it. They haven't committed themselves to anything other than themselves, which makes it really, really hard to make it. So cool kids usually don't make it as good as everybody else in life. Yeah, you got NBA players, you got NFL players, you got Major League Baseball, Major League Hockey, but that is just a small minority of what goes on in this world. So when you look at it, how many players are in the NFL? Anybody know? A couple hundred? Maybe about a couple thousand people that work in the NFL altogether. Let's say 2,000 people. I'm sure that's probably more than what actually works in the NFL, but let's just say that there are 2,000 people that work directly for the NFL. Out of 2,000 people that work for the NFL, how many of those people are millionaires? Probably about that much of them. The players, the coaches, stuff like that, the general managers, they may be millionaires, but the guys that work behind the scenes, not so much. So now we take that 2,000 and let's narrow it down to, let's say a fourth, 500 people that become millionaires from the NFL, from playing in the NFL, working in the NFL, whatever, 500 people. So 500 people out of 7.2 billion people in the world? Tell me how small of a minority that is now. Just a little speck. Okay? But, how many Christians are there in the world? Bless you. How many Christians are in the world? Anybody know? Couple 100 million? 5, 6, 700 million, something like that. How much of an impact can those guys make? They can make a pretty good impact if they all live up to what they're supposed to, right? But even more importantly, how many of those that are truly committed Christians, a couple 100 million, how many of them are going to go a whole lot further than what that NFL player that just signed a $35 million contract is going to go? What do you think? Is a $35 million contract worth it? Or is following Jesus worth it, that you're going to have an eternity in which you have an inheritance? Isn't that what one of the scriptures said? He is the down payment of our inheritance. What is that inheritance? That inheritance is being able to spend that eternity with God. That inheritance is being able to be a child of the God that created and owns everything, not just in this world, but in the universe. Okay? I spoke at a funeral here not too long ago, and one of the sisters of the guy that passed away, she came up to me before the funeral started, and she looks at me and she goes, "Oh, you're the one speaking at the funeral. Well, you better not mess up, because I'll stand up and correct you." Man, you talk about pressure being on. And then she kind of does that little wink at me. You know, she's really, really nice lady. She used to work for the Billy Graham Crusades and such. So she gives me that wink. And I get up and I start speaking, and you know, I personally like to think that it was a pretty good message that was given. But I'm a little biased in that, right? So I start speaking, and I finish, and she didn't stand up, so later on in the day I see her, and I said, "Well, I guess I gave an okay message, right?" And she goes, "Why would you say that?" It's like, "Well, you didn't stand up and correct me." And she just kind of chuckles about it. And then her husband goes, "Go ahead and tell him where he messed up at." Oh man, I shouldn't have said anything. Because go ahead and tell him where he messed up at. And she looks at me and she goes, "Okay. So you talked about in my Father's house there are many," and the CSB version says rooms. For any of you who's heard that said in many, many other translations, it says, "In my Father's house there are many mansions." Would you rather have a room or a mansion? Mansion. Man. Does NFL players have mansions? Some of them do, because there's some of them that they made it big, they made the millions of dollars and everything, and they're broke. I heard a story the other day of a guy who used to play for the Dallas Mavericks, that Mark Cuban, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, went down to a gas station to pick him up because he was panhandling. He was begging at a gas station because he was broke and he was a drug user and he just had nothing. Okay? The last year that this guy played basketball, he made $5 million in 1 year. And he was broke and had nothing. Because he didn't have what mattered. So the Bible tells us, in my Father's house there are many mansions. And I looked at her and I said, you know, I don't know what the actual Greek word is for there. She goes, I don't care. I want a mansion, not a room. Okay, fair enough. But still within inside me, I went and looked it up. And I found the Greek word, and I found the actual interpretation. And it's the Greek word that is used there is the word that we used and we developed the word for mansions out of. But if we were to actually develop it into modern day English as opposed to English from whenever that was translated like that, do you know what that actually translates to nowadays? It says, in my Father's house there are many places of great dwelling. So in my mind, a place of great dwelling is to have this big old 10,000 acre ranch with this huge house sitting on it, cattle and horses and everything else on it. Because that's what I like. Okay? And if we look at things in what the Bible tells us, if we follow Jesus, guess what you're going to end up with? If you're truly following Jesus in your heart and you're content with what He's wanting you to do and you're following with what He's wanting you to do, guess what you're going to end up with? You're going to end up with your heart's desires. It may not be right here on this earth. Sometimes we think a little too small and we think, all right, I'm going to have all this great stuff here on earth. I pay my tithes, so therefore I'm going to be rich. I come down and when the preacher asks for prayer and I come down and I pray for other people because that's what the preacher wants me to do, so therefore I'm going to be blessed. I come down and I raise my hands. Don't get me wrong, raising hands and praying for people is extremely important because you're helping them out and you're helping out your own walk with Christ when you're worshiping properly. But it's not just the raising the hands that gets you into heaven. It's not just the raising of the hands that gets you the blessing. It's not just the paying the tithes that gets you the blessings. Do those help? Of course, because you're following the will of God. God tells us that He wants you doing those things in His Word. And when you do those things, then He's able to reach down and He's able to bless you greatly. But you know what I'm looking for? I'm not looking for a blessing down here. Even if I don't have a penny to my name down here, I know where my blessing is going to be at. It's going to be up there. Not on the ceiling. Not on the roof of the house. Not in outer space. I'm not going to go live in a space station or anything like that. But when I say up there, it's talking about heaven. I'm talking about heaven. Okay? That's where my blessing is going to be. Bless you. That's where my blessings are going to be at. And that's what I look forward to. Because here, everything else is just going to pass away. It's going to be gone. So it doesn't matter if I'm the cool kid at school. It doesn't matter if you know, everybody looks at me and they know that I'm this big buff guy and I can run a 4.2 40 or whatever else like that. That's pretty fast. Yeah, I guess most people don't run that until they're in the NFL if they run it, right? So what's your fastest guy on your team right now?
TJ.
Okay, what's TJ run the 40 in?
I don't know. TJ Dante. TJ.
How Dante?
I don't know what Dante runs. I know what TJ runs.
What's TJ running?
TJ runs like a 4.5.
That's pretty smoking. It's pretty smoking. I remember I went to school with this one kid, and he was a freshman my senior year. And as a freshman, he was the starting running back on the football team. He ended up going and played for Nebraska. And when they came to pick him up, well, first thing is Tyrone was his older brother, and Tyrone was a whole lot better than him. But Tyrone wasn't grounded in church. And this isn't just a story I'm making up. Tyrone wasn't grounded in church. But this particular kid, he was grounded in church. Tyrone, his junior year, he was set to be like one of the best running backs in the state of Texas. And instead, what happened was Tyrone went out and he got his girlfriend pregnant. And after getting his girlfriend pregnant, he decided that he did something wrong. But instead of doing what he was supposed to, what did Tyrone do? Well, Tyrone went over to his dad's house, got his dad's gun, went back over to his house where him and his girlfriend were living. And mind you, he's a junior in high school and he was already living on his own. Okay, so he goes back over to his house where his girlfriend was living, and he shoots his girlfriend, kills her, turns the gun on himself, and shoots himself in the chest. That's the reality of not being with God. You don't think straight up here. Okay? Tyrone's brother, on the other hand, as a freshman, he ended up being able to replace Tyrone on the football team as a starting running back. He ended up his freshman year, his sophomore year, his junior year, and his senior year was one of the top running backs in the state of Texas. And from his freshman year on, he played varsity football. Football is a little bit different in Texas than in most states. Football is life in Texas. And I'm not even kidding when I say that. I mean, we have high school football stadiums that cost $10, $15 million to build. And so anyway, my friend, he gets picked up by Nebraska on a full scholarship, full ride. Goes to Nebraska. You know what? When they came down to pick him up to take him up to college, he took all of his possessions with him in a bag that was about yay big. He had a pair of pants on that he was wearing. He had a pair of pants in the bag. He had 3 t-shirts. I don't know if he had underwear. He had a couple pair of socks. And he went off to Nebraska. Played for a couple of years at Nebraska, did pretty good. They moved him from running back over to free safety. And he did really good. Then he went and played in the Canadian Football League for a couple of years. And he did okay there. And I looked him up the other day to see what he was doing, and I found him. And he is actually running his own youth ministry now. Okay, so now, let me back up a little bit more. When he was in 4th grade, and in 5th grade both, he went up to Washington, D.C. because he could jump rope. How many of you guys know what jump rope for heart is? Anybody? Okay. He did jump rope for heart. He was on the jump rope team. And it was him and 2 other guys, and they were on the jump rope team. And 2 years in a row that they were on jump rope for heart, they went up to Washington, D.C., and they jumped up there, and they won the national championship in jump rope. I didn't even know they had a national championship in jump roping, but they won it. And from there, his career just took off. But aside from all the athletic abilities that he had, he focused on Jesus. That kid was in church every single time the church doors were open, as long as he wasn't sick. He was in church. He went with his mama to church. He went with his auntie to church. He went with friends to church. It didn't matter. If somebody wasn't getting right, he found somebody else to go. And if not, he walked. But he made sure that he was in church. He made sure that he was in church. His mama didn't have to. His aunt didn't have to. His grandpa didn't have to. None of them had to, because he had that desire. He had that personal connection with Jesus, so that he could go to church. And that led him into a very successful life in which now he's reaching out to youth. He didn't make that much money in football because Canadian League doesn't pay that much for football players. It doesn't pay anywhere near what the NFL does. But this youth ministry that he does now, he's a pretty wealthy guy because of this youth ministry. Think of all the lives that he's touching. He never wanted to be the cool kid. He always wanted the backseat. You guys ever see those guys that, at the end of the football game, they come and they talk to him, and they're sitting there, and they're like, yeah, I did this, and I did that, and we won the football game, and I'm the best player on the team. You guys ever seen those guys? What's that one movie about the team out in California that we watched before?
Oh, when the game stands tall.
Yeah, when the game stands tall. So there's a team out there in California. It's a Catholic Christian school. And year after year, I mean, they had what was called a streak. How many of you have seen When the Game Stands Tall? Okay, we'll have to watch it. Year after year after year, they were winning the entire season. They were winning the championship. Give me just a little bit, okay, buddy? And they won over and over and over again. And then they lost. And it was pretty significant that they lost. It was a big blow to them. And when they started winning and everything, they interviewed one kid, and he just couldn't resist. He got in with the hype, and there he went again. The coach didn't like it too much. Okay? Tyrone Tyrone's brother, he wasn't like that. He was the kid who sat in the back that when he saw the reporters coming, he'd turn around and he'd walk off because he didn't want to be the center of attention. And I'm not telling you don't be the center of attention. I'm saying you got to be careful with wanting to be the center of attention. You got to have the attention focused on the one who deserves the attention, which is Jesus Christ himself. And that's the person that we're supposed to be here for. Okay, there's 10 commandments that are given. 10 commandments, and from that we studied last week that came the mitzvah, which was 600 and some odd commandments, right? Okay. And out of 10 commandments, it boiled down to 2 according to Jesus. Who knows what those 2 commandments were?
Love the Lord your God and love your neighbor.
Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy might and all thy strength. And the second is likened to the first. Love your neighbor as yourself. Kind of goes back to that golden rule, right? If you don't want it done to you, don't do it to somebody else. Okay? So, all 10 commandments. I hate to tell you guys this, but even in the Bible, there's do's and don'ts. You shall have no other gods. Don't. You shall make no idols. Don't. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Don't. Remember the Sabbath. That's a do. Okay? Now we'll put it on this hand. Okay? Honor your father and mother. That's a do. You shall not murder. Don't. You shall not commit adultery. Don't. You shall not steal. Don't. You shall not bear false witness. Don't. You should not covet. Don't. 8 don'ts and 2 do's. Okay? And then out of those, the first 4 are about God. Everything else is about another man or another person. So that's why Jesus did that. Love God, love people. Love God, love people. And that's what we're called to do. In loving God, we're going to do his will. We're going to do what he wants us to. In loving people, we're going to do what? What was it that you said we were supposed to be doing? Spreading his word. Because if you saw somebody who was blind walking to a ledge, completely blind, and you're walking up to the ledge of a cliff, you going to stand there and watch him walk off? You guys going to stand there and watch him walk off? You're going to tell him to stop, right?
Yeah.
Okay? Same thing with this. There's a bunch of blind people in this world that are walking right towards that ledge. And if we truly love God, we're going to do his will, which is following his commandment to spread the gospel to everybody. Every living creature on this earth. And if we truly love people, then we're going to stop them before they walk off of that ledge.